It's time for the Mike Wagner Show, powered by Sonic Web Studios. Visit online for all your web design needs at sonicwebstudios.com. The Mike Wagner Show brings you interesting people doing interesting things all across the globe. Now, let's get started on the Mike Wagner Show at themikewagnershow.com. Let's take a little time out and talk to a production director who's been doing movie sets for many, many years. He's best known for all the Jaws films, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Escape from New York, a very elaborate designer, and here to talk about it, and he also does a lot of things and a lot of great work. Here he is, Joe Alves. Joe, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure, Mike.
Great. Okay.
What can I do?
Yeah. Well, you've been a master at a lot of things. You've done production sets for Jaws, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Escape from New York, and you're hailed by many producers and directors as just a great set designer. And of course, you have a big influence on a lot of great movies. So, first of all, before we get into all the films, tell us how you got in this business.
How did I get into the business?
The production designer, yes.
Oh, well, I started actually at Disney's as a trainee animator, and that goes way back. And from that, I was working in special effects, and I actually was so lucky. I was 19 years old. It was a summer job. I was looking for a summer job from art school, and somebody knew somebody who did the hiring, and he was a friend of mine, and so anyway, I thought it was too early to get the job. The guy said, "Yeah, you can start in special effects." Through a number of circumstances, somebody getting ill, somebody had to leave. I ended up assisting Josh Metter, who was an incredible effects guy, and we did the id for a picture called Forbidden Planet, going way back. And some of the sci-fi people remember the id. And Robbie the Robot and all those things. So that was my very beginning. And then I wanted to get into live action and, got a portfolio and walked around and got my first job as a set designer. And in those days, in the studio system, you don't just start as an art director or production designer. You work up. You start as a junior set designer, work your way up to a senior set designer, and you could spend the rest of your career, working on the board as a set designer, which you do the architectural drawings for the sets, which is a good job. Or you could start as an illustrator, and you do the storyboards and the illustrations. If you could sort of exceed further, then you become an assistant art director, and you work with, various art directors of some note. And as an assistant, I was fortunate to work with a good art director, Frank Arrigo, and he taught me a lot. He taught me how to think, not as a designer, but as a director, so I could see how the shot should be and lay the sets out that way. And I was fortunate. I worked with Alfred Hitchcock on a picture called Torn Curtain with Paul Newman and Julie Andrews. That was in the mid-'70s, and then I was fortunate to become a full art director and met Steven Spielberg on a show called Night Gallery, Rod Serling's Night Gallery, and we did a couple of television episodes together of another show called The Psychiatrist. But I did all the seasons of Night Gallery with a lot of sets, a lot of directors, and that was probably my biggest experience in really learning the art of set designing, art directing. And that was the start.
That is amazing, too. And what's it like working with Alfred Hitchcock and Steven Spielberg? So, and of all the directors, that set, who do you think was the best you worked with?
Well, that's just hard to say, because I've worked with a lot of different directors, and they're best for different reasons. And let me say, first of all, there are different schools and different generations. With Hitchcock, he had been an art director. So we could build half sets for Hitchcock. In other words, he knew exactly what he was going to do before he set foot on the stage. And so the planning was a big part in his thing. And then sort of working with the actors was not as big a thing with him as the whole planning. Spielberg, well, I worked with him when he was very young on his first 3 television shows. Very enthusiastic, very creative, but what he needed to do was learn the system. That took a while, just how to use different, people in the system, the prop man, the art director, the various departments. And so I would say on Sugarland Express, which was pretty much all locations, traveling around, and we would plan shots together, and it took him a while to realize that if I gave him some suggestions about how the shots should be, where the cars are lined up, and Goldie Hawn comes down here, that it wasn't just my idea, it was an idea, and he could either accept it or not accept it. And so once he got the idea that we were all working together, it was incredible. We had a wonderful time on Sugarland Express. It was a very the movie wasn't that successful, but it was. I think we had a good time, and Stephen learned a lot. I think he did a good job. And then the next project was Jaws, and that was much more difficult film. And Stephen was we had a very good relationship. Actually, on Jaws, I started on Jaws before Stephen did. I know people were always amazed to hear, that he was not the first person on the picture. And I can give you a little bit of that. What happened was Zanuck and Brown produced Sugarland Express, and David Brown was sort of the literary guy, and his wife was Helen Gurley Brown, and she was the editor of Cosmopolitan magazine at the time. They were New York-based. And she came across galley sheets of this young writer, Peter Benchley, and a book called Jaws. And so she mentioned it to David, might make a good movie. So being a staff guy at the studio at Universal, Dick Zanuck suggested, well, maybe Joe could do some drawings to illustrate the shark activity in the book. And they didn't have a charge number, so they didn't really pay me. I did it in between other shows that I was doing, and I had some time. I would check the sets out, go back to my office, and I did a few dozen, good charcoal sketches of the activity. In fact, I'm just going to give a little sales talk here. I have a book out called Joe Alves Designing Jaws, and they have all those preliminary illustrations I did and the storyboards, and that's available on CatalinaMuseum.org if anybody's curious to see those. I just wanted to bring that out. But anyway, I did those, and at the time, Stephen wasn't assigned, but we had a good relationship, and I'd go over to the cabana that he was staying, he had an office there, and I said, boy, this could be really great. And they had some other director they were looking at, but they weren't happy with him. But anyway, Stephen and I came up with the idea that if we were going to do this, we were going to do it with a full-size shark, a 25-foot shark, out in the real ocean, not a phony backdrop in a studio lake. And that was our commitment to it. And then as I finished the sketches, and we had a meeting with all the department heads. In that period of time, all the departments had studio heads that would dictate who gets what to do. The head of the art department, the camera, the editing, and so forth.
And what was the biggest challenge when it came to the sharks and overall on the set in Jaws? What was the biggest challenge for you?
The biggest challenge was when we had this meeting, and Marshall Green, who was the head of the production department and the head of the studio in production, and we had the head of the effects department there. And after I finished my little spiel on making this 25-foot shark and real ocean, and he referred to the effects department and said, "What do you think?" And they said, "We can't do this. I mean, it's never been done. It would take a year and a half to make this. And besides, we have bigger movies like the Hindenburg, you know." And Marshall got upset and said, "Jaws could be a bigger movie than the Hindenburg." And everybody sort of chuckled, you know, because Hindenburg was going to be the big movie. So when the meeting broke up, I was collecting my drawings, and I started to leave, and Marshall called me back, and he says, Can you get the shark made?" And being young and ambitious, you know, sort of young, I still wasn't that young, but I said, "Sure." So I started researching, and I found Bob Matty, who had been a retired effects guy at Disney, did the squid for 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and in his late 60s, very enthusiastic guy. Really, you know, Bob, he could do anything. Anyway, the bottom line was this. That was October, November of 73. The book came out in February 74, and the studio said, "We're going to make this movie, and we're going to make it the 1st of April. And Stephen talked him out to making it the 1st of May because we're going to be putting people in the water. So that didn't give us a year and a half to make the shark. It gave us like 4 or 5 months. That was the biggest problem in making the shark, was the time element. We did not get the fair amount of time.
We'll be back with more after this on The Mike Wagner Show. Hey everyone, it's Mike Wagner from The Mike Wagner Show. If you like what we play, if you love great guests, and enjoy lots of fun, then how'd you like to be a sponsor of my show? We're looking for businesses to be part of the great show and a great way to let people know about what you do. If you're a singer, writer, actor, author, or an interesting person with a great product and looking for exposure, you've come to the right place. Call me or text at 701-301-7705 or email to mike@themikewagnershow.com and I'll get you set up with the right sponsor package. Don't delay. Do it today. Looking for a professional website without breaking your budget? Sonic Web Studios is the answer. Sonic Web Studios offers fast, affordable custom web designs that blows the competition away. Call today at 800-303-3960 or email to support@sonicwebstudios.com. Mention the Mike Wagner Show and get 10% off your first order. Sonic Web Studios. Take your image to the next level. Now, back to the Mike Wagner Show at themikewagnershow.com, powered by sonicwebstudios.com. And it's also amazing, too, on how the film came out. You worked with Carl Gottlieb, and also Richard Dreyfuss was also in the movie. Then later came Jaws 2 and 3, and also especially the 3D. You can tell us a little bit more about that one as well.
Well, when Jaws then became a big success, and then Jaws 2 came in, and the producers brought me in as a associate producer, second unit director. I directed about, I got 100 days of second unit, because they fired the first director. We replaced him with somebody that I worked with in Night Gallery. And so I was a designer, a second unit director, and associate producer on Jaws 2, which was an extremely difficult movie. So then when Jaws 3 came up, it seemed like a possibility that I could direct that one. And that was sort of weird because a television producer, Alan Landsberg, had bought the rights. The studio, Zanuck and Brown, weren't interested in doing another sequel. Sequels weren't really popular, except for Rocky at that time, I think. And but the fact that it took place on a sea park, Richard Matheson was the original writer, and we went and scouted the locations, and I saw in a water park in Florida this underwater film of tide pools and stuff, and it was in 3D. And I came back and came out, and he said, "What, Jaws 3D?" I said, "Yeah, not Jaws in 3, Jaws 3D, taking the onus off the 3 by making it 3D."